Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to this evening's SAVOR event. I'm Peter Brantley, the Director of Online Strategy at the UC Davis Library. SAVOR is a collaboration between the Robert Mondavi Institute and the UC Davis Library, a program designed to engage the public on topics where UC Davis is providing new insights through its research on food and beverages. Tonight, we'll explore an ancient beverage, sake. We'll focus on how sake brewers in the United States build on traditional methods while experimenting with variations in rice, milling, flavor profiles, and more. Now, I'd like to invite Ned Spang, Director of the Robert Mondavi Institute, to the podium.
All right. Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate it. And welcome to the audience here in person and also virtually. We appreciate you joining us tonight. To provide some background and to line up with what Peter said, the mission of the Robert Mondavi Institute is really to share the art of science, of food science, winemaking, beer making with the general public. And we try to do these in engaging formats, inviting you to come tour our campus, have great speaker events, or even do a tasting. And tonight you guys get 2 out of 3, which is very exciting. So we're thrilled to be hosting this panel, excited to have people visiting from the Bay Area. And it's my great pleasure, of course, to introduce my colleague, Glen Fox, who will be moderating the session. Glen was appointed the Anheuser-Busch Endowed Professor of Malting and Brewing Sciences in the Department of Food Science and Technology in 2019. An expert in barley, malt, and brewing, he has published numerous book chapters and journal articles that have advanced the science of brewing. Glen came to UC Davis from the University of Queensland in Australia, where he was a senior fellow and has had many years of experience working with barley breeding programs, malting, and brewing industries around the world. Glen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you. It is really nice to see people in person. And these events are really wonderful to see everyone coming along. So it is a great opportunity for us to maybe explore something that probably people have heard a lot about, but may not really understand the nuances that go with sake production. So we have 3 wonderful guests with us tonight. First off is Yoko Kumano, who is co-founder of Umami Mart, a shop in Oakland, California, just down the road a bit, specializing in Japanese drinks. Since 2012. We then have Yoshihiro Sako, who is co-founder of the Den Sake Brewing in Oakland, also down the road a bit. And he started way back in 2007, managing a specialty sake and wine shop down in the Bay in San Francisco. And finally, Erin is Vice President of Sales of Sake Rice and Retail for Sun Valley Rice in Arbuckle, California. So that's a brief introduction to them, but I am going to ask them to explain a little bit more about their background, how they got into sake, and maybe one special thing that they want to share with you that nobody else knows about sake.
All right.
Okay?
It's a challenge.
Yes.
So I fell in love with sake when I lived in Japan, in Tokyo, from 2005 to 2010. I'm originally from the Bay Area. I moved back in 2010. And that's when my business partner, Kayoko, and I opened the doors to Umami Mart in 2012, actually. We had an online store prior to that. We started out importing glassware, ceramics, kitchenware. And in 2014, we got our alcohol license, or beer and wine license, to sell retail. And that's when we really started getting into sake. And actually, prior to that, prior to opening Umami Mart, I did work at Takara Sake, which is in Berkeley, at the tasting room for almost 2 years. And that's where I really learned a lot about sake types, how to talk about sake with consumers, and working at that brewery, which is over 30 years old now, really gave me a lot of inspiration to learn more about sake. And in the past 10 years that we've had Umami Mart, or 11, we've definitely seen a lot of more interest and growth in sake. We have a club called Sake Gumi that has grown to 200 plus members. We ship nationwide, and then also a lot of people just come through our doors picking up their sakes. And in 2019, a little bit prior to the pandemic, we moved to a location where there is a tasting bar as well. So we have the tasting component, and then we also have the retail. And we've just been having a lot of fun. And I think the tidbit that no one would know will come in my next section. Yeah. Okay.
So Yoshi.
Yes.
My name is Yoshihiro Sako. I'm the partner of Den Sake Brewing in Oakland. I came to United States year 2000 from Japan, Kanagawa Prefecture, and I was not planning on doing anything related to sake back then. I came to United States and I was just learning English. I started playing music. I was playing music in Japan too. So then I kind of gave up. Then I came to United States, but again, kind of like I did fire of playing music again. So I went back to the music thing, and I was in 3 bands and just playing, gigging, recording for a while. Then I got the opportunity to manage sake wine shop in San Francisco. Then I started to learn about wine first. I did a lot of tasting with some master of wine and a lot of master sommeliers, and I more like self-taught. And but when I was working there, a lot of people, customer, asked me about sake. That shop, we used to carry a lot of wines and sakes, 200 wines, 200 sakes, and a lot of people just asked me about sake because probably I look Japanese and I look Asian, probably. So I kind of like started to go into more like, the study about sake since then. Then I kind of realized a couple years of studying, I realized maybe this is my thing. I should do this. I felt like this is mission from the God. Then I kind of flew into more like a sake world. And after doing a sake wine buyer for 5 years, then I moved on to a more sake specialist, to a different restaurant. And I did it for 5 years, sake sommelier / sake specialist. Then I opened the sake brewery year 2017 in Oakland. Then we produce about 1,500 cases a year right now. Yeah, that's it.
It's great. And Erin?
Well, I came to the sake industry and to the rice industry in general in a bit of a roundabout way. I started my career often as a physicist and engineer at Intel Corporation until about 10 years ago. I had 2 little kids at home. I was looking for a change that would give me both more flexibility as well as sort of a more fulfilling career. And I had the opportunity to come and work with Sun Valley Rice. And honestly, I fell in love with the rice industry. I can't tell you anything I enjoy more than connecting rice growers. Rice growers are a group of people who are probably one of the most innovative groups I've worked with. And connecting rice growers to the consumers, the end consumers, whether they're eating rice or using our rice to brew sake, connecting those consumers with the rice growers and the processes and the techniques they use to both grow this really healthy, high-quality food, but also do a ton of things to support local wildlife and conservation efforts. So, and also working with brewers. So I've been working with sake brewers now for just over 10 years, and to sake brewers like Yoshi, and they have been so generous with me in their time, teaching me how to help our growers grow fantastic sushi or sake rice, and how to help us at Sun Valley Rice and Valley Select mill a really high quality sake rice, because the quality of the rice really translates as the quality of the sake. So it's really just been a gift working in this industry. Again, just getting to to work with the people who are producing the food and then working with the people who are making something amazing out of it.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. So just for the audience, both live and virtual, what we're going to do is cover a few topics. We're actually going to cover a little bit of background. We'll dive into a little bit of background about sake production, rice production, and a few of those sorts of things. We'll then talk specifically about sake process and the parallels with other beverage industries like the brewing industry and the wine industry. Where does sake fit in that sort of chain of beverages? We'll then cover a little bit of the unique US sake industry, how similar or different it is to the traditional Japanese sake industry. Time permitted, we'll get to some sustainability topics and some challenges and opportunities that face this industry along with other industries. So that's sort of what's coming in the next 40-something minutes, whatever we've got left. So let's start with the sake background. And Yoko, if you could share some of the history of sake production.
Yeah, sure. So there are a few theories about where sake originated, but I think generally everybody, the general consensus is that it started around the Yayoi period, and this is when rice cultivation, and koji came from China to Japan. And the sake back then was didn't look like what we think of sake now, which is like the clear beverage. During this time, it was porridge, like is probably spoiled rice left out, and that was the beginning of sake. Oh, they don't know. Next slide. Oh yes. Okay. And then we fast forward to the Muromachi period, and this is when soboshu, which is basically sake that is made in Buddhist temples. Lots of things were made in temples back then because they served as cultural centers for the towns and regions. And there was pressure from the capital, Kyoto, to collect more taxes. And sake was, enjoyed in its form, which was not so marketable or not so stable until that point. But because there was pressure to make more and also have it more shelf stable for shipping to other areas of Japan, the Buddhist temples came up with a few technologies and techniques. One of the main ones was sandan jikomi, which basically means that you add rice, water, yeast, and koji 3 times to the main mash. So you're adding volume. So they had satisfied that the volume issue by creating this new technique. And then secondly, they did start to make sake with like filtering, pressing, and also pasteurizing. And this was to enable them to ship it farther. So this is a big era for sake because basically it became like something that they could, make as a product. And it also, at that time, after the filtering and the pasteurization and the pressing, it started to look like what we know sake to look like now, which is the clear beverage. And then I will move on. Yeah, thank you. And then again, fast forwarding to World War II and post-World War II. Around the World War II, there was a lot of strict rationing around rice. The rice was, reserved for the soldiers. So sake brewers were basically prohibited from using a lot of rice for the rice production. And so you started to see a lot of sake that was heavily fortified with distilled grain spirits. And so the quality of sake kind of, dipped a lot during the war. And then after the war, when those rations were lifted and, things were looking up a little bit, sake brewers were able to bring up the quality by incorporating, more rice back into the sake production method. And also the public was, they wanted more quality after the war. So the ability of the brewers to be able to use more rice did bring up the quality. But also technologies in rice polishing really changed how sake started to taste, and we'll probably go into that a lot with the polishing. But then we started to get more of the ginjos and the daiginjos and these more like fruity floral flavors because of the enabling of the rice polishing. Quality really went up, a lot more experimentation during this time. And then, in the past 10 years, if we really fast forward now, during the time that we've had our shop, we've felt it too, but exports of sake has tripled in the past 10 years. So Japan is looking outward. And I think that, that's also very connected to, why we're here today. So it's really exciting to see it going in the direction that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Yoshi, about the actual production of sake itself, Yoko's already mentioned a couple of things there that might be somewhat of an unusual ingredient to most people. Home brewers or winemakers don't use things like koji. Mm-hmm. So if you want to sort of walk us through the actual process of making sake and
Sure.
maybe the uniqueness of koji.
Sure. Can I have a quick?
Oh.
All right, so I have a lot of slides, so I gotta go quick for each slide. So this is the opening page. That's where our brewery is. I'm gonna try to explain how sake brewing process goes, but in case of our brewery. So it's gonna be a little different from all the bigger sake breweries in Japan. Our brewery is super, super tiny, so let's see.
Hold on one second. It's not.
Okay.
I think they call that technical difficulties. But that's okay. That's okay. One of the parallels that we can see in the brewing industry, certainly with sake, is beer was probably first made by accident. Mm-hmm. Barley was left out, it got wet, and then there's this transformation of this sugary water into this new, more tasty, healthy beverage.
That makes you feel good.
It makes you feel pretty good. So we'll touch more on these parallels soon.
Awesome. So that's one. That is like inside of my brewery. That's entrance room. This is where I wash rice and soak it in the water, and also the steamer basket you see is that's the tool that I use for steam rice. This is the biggest steamer basket for dim sum available in the United States. I'm using that. And next slide, please. So this is also, the picture is kind of a little bit shrunk. But this is our core room, fermentation room. We have 1,000 liter tanks, and we are looking press machine. What you see, the wood beam that you see, that's the press machine, basically. I'm going to explain that later on the press section. Next slide, please. So this is rice washing. That's the start. So I wash rice. It's a 10 kilogram each in each bag. 10 kilogram is about 20 pounds, I think. And so we time this soaking time to limit the water absorption ratio. That's the key to create ideal style of steamed rice. And so the top pictures, that's the picture that I'm washing rice, and below that, that's soaking in the buckets. And the right one, draining, I use those engine hoist, and I hang this mesh basket and they spin it. It's very high-tech centrifugal draining system I learned from the sake brewery that I apprenticed at. And the next slide, please. And this is the steaming pot. So this the dim sum basket is now it's in use, and I steam about 40 minutes to 50 minutes. Then I take it out from the steamer basket once it's done. Then I cool it down. And the next slide, please. Then this is the koji making pictures. So after rice is steamed, steamed rice is carried into the koji room, which is the usually heated. So I use just electric heater, panel heater on the wall. And it's all the walls, ceiling and the floor, everything is insulated. So it's very hot, about 30 to, I sometimes use 40 Celsius too. And so what koji does, koji is basically, it's a fungus, it's a mold. So what koji does is the koji eats starch and create sugar. So it's a sugar making process. Unlike grape for wine, grape contains sugar already. So if you add yeast, yeast can eat the sugar and create alcohol and the CO2. But for grains, doesn't contain sugar, similar to beer. So that's why we use a koji to break down starch and convert it into the glucose. So that's a koji making process. And usually koji making process takes about, it depends on the breweries and it depends on the style of sake you are aiming at. It's usually about maybe 40 hours to sometimes 55 hours. That's kind of longer koji making period. But so during that period, it constantly, it requires like kneading them or let the air in, temperature control and the humidity control is required. So it's very nerve-wracking process, but at the same time, it's very rewarding and fun process because that koji reflect to the end product sake flavor a lot. And the next slide, please. And that's the shubo starter, the yeast starter. Shubo means shu is sake, bo is mother. So literally it's a mother of sake process. So it depends on the method of yeast starter. I use 3 different kind of method of making yeast starter. It takes about, shortest one is 3 days, but the longest one takes about 40 days to make just a yeast starter. So this is like a miniature version of a whole big fermentation tank. So this yeast starter contains rice, steamed rice and the koji rice and also water and the yeast. That's the ingredients. And so this yeast starter, what I'm making is, it's called the sokujo method. That's the most kind of common way of making yeast starter in the modern days. Yes, and the next slide, please. And the shikomi means you just keep adding rice, steamed rice, and the koji, and also the very first addition we usually add the yeast starter. Like Yoko explained, it's a 3-step fermentation. So first day we add the steamed rice and the koji rice and the water, and the second day it's a resting day normally. And the third day, we add more rice and more koji rice. And the fourth day, we do the same, but the more bigger volume. The next slide, please. And this is 3 pictures. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a pressing. And the far left, is it left? Yes. Yes, far left. So that's my wife is helping putting mash into the sake bag. Sometimes made of cotton, sometimes made of synthetic material, but it looks like a pillowcase. So one side is open, so we put the sake mash inside this in a bag, and bring it into the pressing vat. And we just stack them. And the next slide, please. Also, this is a pressing pot, and our pressing method is called Haneki pressing. It's one of the old school pressing method. We use leverage power. So basically, after putting all the sake bags, usually I use maybe 100 of them for one tank. I put all of them into this pressing vat and put the steel plates, the lid on top of it, then put all the spacer wood blocks on top of it. And I drop all those big wood beam. It's made of acacia. And usually juice comes out from the bottom valve because it's just squeezing out with the weight of the beam. And I hang these water barrels using engine hoist from the beam as an extra weight. And it takes about 3 days to press whole one tank. And the next slide, please. And the bottling, we were very small production, so we use this very, very simple small bottle filler. Usually we get a lot of volunteers to do this. And the next slide, please. Then that's a pasteurization process. So pasteurization means the sake is going through the heating process. Our method is called the binhire, means pasteurize. It's a pasteurization happen. Sake is still inside the bottle and the cap is closed so that the aroma or freshness doesn't come out, doesn't release. So that's kind of one of the best way to keep the freshness in the sake bottle. A lot of sake brewers in Japan, they use this method, even the bigger sake brewery, to bring their sake to the competition purpose usually. And the pasteurization is basically, in our case, we pasteurize only once. Some sake is pasteurized twice. And the pasteurization slow down the enzyme action come from the koji. So enzyme is still alive if sake is unpasteurized. So that enzyme over time keeps creating a glucose. So sake becomes sweeter and sweeter over time. So not only the sweetness, a lot of different compounds or different flavor or different aroma comes out over time if it's unpasteurized. So to slow down that change, we pasteurize it. So I would say like after like 3 months or 4 months from pressing, usually pasteurized sake is usually fresher. You can get more freshness. Instead, unpasteurized sake, we call it namazake. Namazake flavor profile keeps changing over time. So some people prefer it, but some people don't like it. So we pasteurize most of the sake, our sake. And the next slide, please. And yeah, that's our product, 4 products. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's been mentioned a few times. It seems like rice is important. Erin, with your wonderful rice farmers, could you talk about the varieties they grow, and then post-harvest, what's this polishing process that you're talking about?
Sure, I'd love to. So first off, California rice, in the last picture there, is one of the most beautiful crops I think that we grow here in California. And next slide. And lucky us, being here in Yolo County, all this rice growing region is literally in our backyard. California is the second largest rice growing state in the nation. We grow about 20% of the nation's rice. And the rice we grow is called Japonica rice. So this is rice that came from the origins of Eastern China and Japan, and is a specialty short and medium grain rice. What makes our region so special for growing rice is first, we have this really heavy clay soil. So it's super rich in nutrients, and it also, that clay basis, it makes it so it doesn't really drain. And so that lack of drainage, one, makes it great for growing rice, as it helps conserve water. Also, it makes it really hard to grow anything else. So oftentimes this 500,000 acres of rice growing region we have is likely always going to be rice, in this region because it grows rice really well, but not much else. So that coupled with this cool, clean water source we have from the mountain snowmelt, from the Sierra Nevadas, feeding these rice paddies, and then together with our hot, dry summers, so we have really hot days and really cool nights, all of those growing conditions are just about perfect for Japonica rice. So you may not realize, but anytime you have sushi here in Davis or anywhere else in the nation, and really many places in the world, you're often having California rice. You're pretty much guaranteed it when you're having it here in California. So it's really world famous as a sushi rice or for other Japanese cuisine as well. And about a little less than 2%, depending on the crop size, so 1 to 2% of our rice growing here in California goes to sake brewing. Next slide, please. So one of the things I love about California rice and the story of California rice is it's really sort of, it's showcasing such an American story. It's connections between, cross-cultural connections. It's innovation. It's sharing cultural identities and things like that. And sorry, I didn't mean to bore you. But I can continue on. So about 100 years ago is when rice began being cultivated here in the Sacramento Valley. And then coming into the late 1940s is when the variety Calrose was developed. So Calrose is, and it continues to be, the #1 variety we grow it here in California. And many people don't know, though, that Calrose was actually bred from a sake rice. In Japan, you don't eat sake rice and you don't use table rice to brew sake. Here in California, we've used a sake rice to grow table rice, and over time we've bred it to be a really beautiful table rice, but also still brews great sake. And so, just as Yoko mentioned, there's a number of Japanese brewers throughout the late 70s to the early 90s. If you remember this time period, you could really see there was just a huge boom in Americans and other consumers really wanting to experience Japanese culture. People wanted to eat sushi, they wanted to drink sake, and they really wanted to experience this culture. And so there was 5 large Japanese brewers who set up shop here on the West Coast and started brewing sake with Calrose rice. Bringing us into today, we're now growing other sake rice varietals, including Yamada Nishiki, which is thought to be like the king of sake rice. So we grow that here in California. And over my tenure as selling sake rice, I've really seen just a huge boom in craft brewers like Yoshi. So when I first started about 10 years ago, there might have been 3 or 4 craft brewers that I knew about. Now there's over 30 craft brewers throughout the United States who are building new consumers by, brewing sake in their own backyards and educating people about it. So it's been really fun to watch. Next slide. So 2 big portions about rice that influence the quality of sake. First, the rice varietal. So just like wine, a different varietal is going to have different flavors for different rice varietals and different flavors for the sake. Different from really anything that I'm aware of is the sake. It depends on the rice polishing quality. And so what that means is basically when you're brewing any or making any alcohol, you want to take out the proteins and really just start with the starches. In the rice kernel, the proteins live sort of on the outside of the rice kernel. So for the highest quality sake, we just very, very slowly polish off the outer surfaces of the rice kernel to increase the quality of the sake, to decrease the proteins and increase the sugars. So for the highest quality sakes, you're actually milling more than at least 50% of the rice kernel off to make a Junmai Daigenjo sake. One more slide for me, please. And I won't talk too much about this because I know we're going to get to it later, but I just want to show you some of these beautiful pictures. Again, in California rice growers are producing not only super high quality rice to make sake with or to eat, but also providing habitat and actually increasing the biodiversity, not just of California, but for the whole Western Hemisphere.
Okay, that's great. So that's really just a snapshot of sake production. We could spend an hour, many hours, talking in detail, but we're trying to cover quite a few topics tonight. And we have talked about some parallels with other beverage industries, and being the beer guy, I know the interest in having starch as a source of producing fermentable sugars for yeast to make something. What does yeast make? Oh, alcohol, that's right. And CO2. And CO2 is important in the brewing process because we like to see our bubbles. And we actually like to keep a little bit of protein because the bubble wall is formed with protein. So we have that parallel in that context. We're still interested in feeding a yeast source. So that's one parallel, and you've used the word brewer several times. For me, that means a beer brewer, but we're thinking about sake brewers as well. So while the process is slightly different, I think the overall objective is the same. But how would we compare sake to wine production, Yoko?
Yeah, I get that question a lot at the shop. Sake, the alcohol volume is pretty similar to wine. It's 15%, and so it's just a touch above wine. I also, always, recommend if you don't have sakeware at home, pour sake in a wine glass because it functions very similar as far as you're going to sip the sake. Also, sake is meant to be paired with food, so it just works so well within a meal context. So if you have, sake poured in a wine glass, people then see the wine glass and they know that they're going to sip it, and then you may have it with food. Sometimes the little sake glasses, the traditional ones, people get tempted to, take a shot. So that's also why I do recommend, if you're going to put it on the table and you want to enjoy the sake, a wine glass is always a great option. So those are some of the main parallels, I think, the food friendliness and then also the alcohol volume.
Yeah. So we're going to get back to that conversation around koji. So Yoshi, tell us more about the specialty of koji and why it's so important for sake production.
Yes, sake is probably one of the most important, koji making is one of the most important process, directly reflect to the flavor of the sake. Similarity to beer is basically the beer use malt for sugar production. Then we use the koji for the sugar production. And so a lot of people say sake is brewed like beer and drink like wine. Same, the beer and the wine, beer and the sake, we use the grains as primal ingredients. And we drink like wine because we drink sake with food a lot of times. And sake is just a pairing pot. It's very similar to wine. You get a lot of nuances, kind of similar to wine from sake as well. But just biggest difference is just, wine's backbone is acidity. When you do a pairing, acidity is a backbone wine, but sake's backbone is umami. And umami and acidity both are different element to the different job to the food in your mouth. So that's, the acidity usually cuts through the fat and also, more richer sauce. But the umami from the sake, it's a main component is amino acid or succinic acid that creates umami flavor. Umami flavor is, what umami, right? Just savoriness or brothiness, that's a umami flavor. What umami does is usually envelop the whole flavor elements, taste elements, and create a harmony in your mouth. That's what umami does. So when you think about doing a pairing, I think you kind of need to switch your brain when you do a sake pairing. You don't look for high acidity from sake to cut through the fat. But umami, that's the most important job the sake do to the food pairing. And that umami mainly comes from the koji making. So the koji that's why koji is the most important part for the, structure of sake.
Okay. Sounds pretty important. But what about rice? Is the varietal effect or is there a polishing effect on overall processing or quality of sake, Erin?
Yeah, so in Japan, there's a number of sake rices that are grown, and typically the rice grower lives right next to the miller, and they've been there for generations and generations. In California, we do things on a little bit of a different scale, and so if you look at California rice fields, they tend to be a little larger. We have, we're working on building our capacity to do more and more sake rice varietals. Currently, we have two focuses in sake rice. So first is Calrose, which again started from a sake rice varietal, and the second is Yamada Nishiki. And one of the fun things tonight was we're actually going to get to taste three sakes, one from Japan and two grown with California rice. They all have Yamada Nishiki in them. Yoshi Sake is a Yamada Nishiki 60% polish, grown in California. And then we have a Sogud Sake that's owned by the CEO of our company, Sun Valley Rice. And this is also built with a 50% or Junmai Dengenjo Yamada Nishiki. So I'm really excited for you all to get to taste the differences. You have the same rice, but two different brewing processes and also different polish rates. So you all will get to kind of taste the differences on your own, and as well as taste the difference between American-made sake and Japanese-made sake. Over my time through the sake rice industry, I've just been it's so exciting for me to work with so many different brewers and to see how you could use the exact same rice, even the exact same polish rate, and create such different profiles of sake. So there's really, to me, there's no sort of bad way to describe it, but just to describe, like, gosh, you're using the same ingredients, but able to provide so many different nuances with that.
So you mentioned the US sake industry. So Yoko, what's different or special about the US industry that sort of sets it apart from possibly some traditional processes in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can probably draw a lot of parallels with other industries as well, but the American sake industry is very experimental and very free. And it's really wonderful to see, different, there's no kind of preconceived notion of how to make the sake. In Japan, they've had thousands of years of, how they do things. And so in the States, it's like there is very little history. So there are a lot of people making different styles, a lot of people from different backgrounds making sake. I mean, I think that's a huge one. I mean, even in Japan, things are changing. There are more women brewers. There are some brewers from abroad in Japan making the sake. I mean, this does change the way the sake is made too. But in the US, everybody's, from a different background, mostly, but, a lot of people. So that coming to the brewing with a different perspective, like, for example, people who are brewing beer, a lot of them go into sake making. And so having that perspective changes, there's like hop-infused sake in the US. And, more kind of bubbly styles or, fruity styles. So I think that spirit of experimentation and doing something totally different is really exciting. Another big thing is that in Japan, the licenses for making sake are limited. So you can't homebrew in Japan for sake. So that really limits the experimentation portion as well. I mean, we could brew it at home, start that way, and then try it out. But in Japan, it's a licensing issue. You can't kind of just try it out. So
yeah. So Erin, over to you in terms of what's the potential for future rice varieties? Is the rice breeding programs focused more on sake-style rice, or are they still focused on sushi-style rice? That's the opportunity now with the growing sake market.
Yeah. So if you noticed the current amount of rice that of the U.S. crop or the California crop that is devoted to sake brewing, even at the largest scale, sake brewers is still less than 2% of our total crop. So one of the challenges of bringing on new varieties is just scale. So the more you all drink sake, the more varietal we'll be able to produce. And it can take a really long time to develop seed programs for sake rice varietals. So for example, when we developed the Yamada Nishiki program, we started that in, I think, the year 2013 or so. And we started with maybe 200 pounds of seed, and it takes maybe 5 years to get from that amount of seed to doing a whole production scale, like we do here in California. So it just takes time, and it takes the consumer demand. So right now, I think we'll continue to see more and more demand as we see more demand for the sake nuances. So we'll see more ability to do additional varietals. I will say California rice growers are always, they probably enjoy sake rice more than others, even though it can be really challenging to grow. For example, Yamada Nishiki grows really tall. It's like over 4 feet tall. It has the longest maturing season of any other variety we grow in California, compared to like a Calrose rice that only grows about this tall. So it's a lot easier to farm. But still, California rice growers love growing sake rice because they get to drink the sake, right? There's no better way to enjoy your crop, the thing that you've sowed so much energy and effort into, to getting to taste it artisan sake like what Yoshi makes. So it's a fun product to be a part of.
Excellent. So we've talked a little bit about the processing, and it's been mentioned a couple of times now in pairing sake with food. So Yoshi, I think you specifically mentioned pairing sake with food. Do you want to explore how that pairs well with American food?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Also, yeah. So I cannot, I'm trying to just see how American sake is, but I cannot really speak for, all of the sake breweries in the United States. But my case, I decided to make sake has slightly higher acidity than typical sake, and has a fuller body, and a little bit more moderate aroma, not overly flowery or fruity. That's all for pairing for California cuisine. And food here, I mentioned earlier a little bit. I think compared to Japan, it's a little bit more, the sauce is richer and fattier, more protein rich. Need a little acidity to cut through it. And also need a little more body for sake. I really love wine, and I drink wine and the sake both at the dinner table. My wife cooks a lot of different type of food, including like Japanese food and also something California influenced food as well. And I try to drink, not every dinner, but most of the dinner, I try to drink the sake and the wine together. The one glass and wine and the one glass sake in it. And when I keep doing that, I kind of started to notice sake's acidity is too low for me. And now, because I started brewing sake and keep drinking sake, not every night, but most of the night. So then I kind of like feel like it's interesting. My palate is becoming anti-acid. I cannot really take super acidic drink anymore because my palate is used to, the drinking sake, which is a umami, focused beverage. But my sake, I want my sake to be a little bit more, has a high acidity, because I still love wine, and I want to bridge the gap between wine and the sake somehow. And I still want to remain all those sake, a traditional technique and the traditional flavor of sake at the same time too. So yeah, my concept is just higher acidity. That's my sake's the concept.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a lot, again, more parallels with the brewing industry, or the beer brewing industry, because we talk about, and it might be a surprise to a lot of people, that we can easily talk about pairing beer and food. And we talk about the same sort of effects, where you're eating certain foods and you want to have the hops and the acids from the hops cutting through the fatty component of certain foods. And there's many sort of beers we can match with certain foods as well. So again, some great parallels there. So we're getting to the point where we need to think about the industry, the long-term industry here, and it's a topic that all industries have on their radar. Some it's a very upfront on their radar, others it's just hovering in the background, and that's sustainability. So Yoko, where do you see, or what's the overall strategy for some producers to think about sustainability?
Well, I think I love seeing that there's more local breweries that are popping up, because shipping sake from Japan, especially cold chain shipping over months, to me seems like, not so sustainable. I mean, we will always want that, and I think that it's great that we can get lots of product from Japan. But I think that having more local breweries, fresher sakes from shorter distances will really help with making sake more accessible and more sustainable. And it kind of works on many levels too, because when we stock, we have Den Sake, which is in Oakland. It's like literally, 2 or 3 miles from our store. And then we have Sequoia Sake in San Francisco. People really feel connection to the sake, even if they just have never really had sake, but they want to try it because it's made in Oakland or San Francisco. I think that community building is really good for creating more sustainability in the industry, and just raising more awareness as to, where's the rice grown? Where is this coming from? I mean, we're so concerned with that with our meat and vegetables, and I think with sake, that is also something that is within reach as well.
Yeah, and Yoshi, as a sake brewer, and we were talking about this before we went to air, about supply chain issues during COVID, and how that had an impact on many, many industries. So as a sake brewer, what are the things that sort of keep you hopefully not awake too long at night about being sustainable in your business, but maybe the sake brewing industry overall?
So we have the byproduct called kasu, sake kasu, and sake kasu is basically it's called sake lees. It's a leftover rice solids after pressing. So you get kind of like a white kind of rice solids after pressing, right? So in Japan, we use that sake kasu a lot for cooking. Marinate fish or sometimes meat or pickling. And a lot of chefs here, they are experimenting and they're using kasu, our kasu. So they take our kasu for their cooking and restaurant. And interesting, one of the Italian restaurant in San Francisco, they use our kasu for making pizza dough also. A lot of people experimenting. It's a great thing. And also kasu, we get a lot of kasu once it's pressing happen. So some people taking our kasu to make a rich soil, to make organic fertilizer as well. So that's also I think great way to just use the sake kasu without wasting it.
Yeah, so upcycling waste streams, and that's a big part of a sustainability program, is reducing waste. So our rice farmers, this is very much on their radar. Sustainability is really their business. So how are the rice farmers viewing sustainability and maybe some strategies they're implementing for that?
Yeah, so I always like to say, rice farmers have been practicing sustainability since before it was cool. They really have been practicing these regenerative practices for really decades now. After the rice in the field is harvested, so we're just in harvest season right now, so you might have seen tractors moving around the fields recently. Once harvest is done, they're going to integrate the rice straw back into the soil to sink those nutrients back into the soil. Again, zero waste in the rice field. And what that does is it also just, not only does it bring those nutrients back into the soil, it also, once they flood up the fields, it also provides food and biodiversity for all kinds of wildlife, including migratory birds like ducks and geese, shorebirds and others. And not only that, currently they're working with UC Davis on other programs to actually integrate salmon fry into rice paddies. So always being not just growing healthy food, but being stewards of the land and actually working together with conservationists to increase species health, including the current California salmon. So for any industry, we all have to be work in that collaborative nature to continue to, like I said, not only make great products, but be stewards of the land and support our wildlife as well.
That's excellent. Oh my goodness me, are we, sure. Sorry about that, folks.
Could you compare the fermentation times for sake versus beer and wine? And sort of quick second question, are there different strains of koji, and does that impact the flavor?
I can take the koji question, and you can take the fermentation time. You can think about it.
Yeah, well, I know the fermentation of sake brewing, but I don't know the beer and the wine, so I cannot really compare.
We all get to answer this one.
As far as koji, 3 types that are talked about a lot with Japanese beverage making. Yellow koji is the most common for making sake. People do make sake with white koji. It's a little bit higher in like citric acid.
Yeah.
You make Den
Blanc,
with the white koji, but yellow is the most common. There is a black koji that is usually associated with awamori, which is a distilled beverage made in Okinawa. And I don't know if there are actually I've tried like 2 sakes made with black koji, but yellow koji is the most common.
Also, the yellow koji, there's so many different types of strain for yellow koji too. So you can choose, the brewer usually choose the ideal koji strain for your ideal sake. Yeah.
And fermentation time for sake.
Fermentation time it's depend on the totally depend on the batch, and it depend on the what kind of sake you want to create as well. But typically I would say the yeast starter, the modern day sake making, the sokujo method takes 2 weeks. If you include the yeast starter's fermentation period, that's 2 weeks already. And the main fermentation, usually about from the shortest one is 19 days, and probably the longest one I done is 40 days. So I would say, 90 to 40 plus 2 weeks. So about 55 days for the fermentation. Yeah.
So for beer and wine, they're a little different, and certainly even within beer, we have different fermentations because we use different strains of Saccharomyces to brew lagers or ale styles. So ales are relatively quick because we're fermenting at much warmer temperatures, closer to 70 Fahrenheit, 20 Celsius, and that happens fast because of the temperature. Lagers are fermenting at a much lower temperature, close to around 50 Fahrenheit or 10 Celsius, and it can take literally weeks, similar to 3 or 4 weeks. And then there's a maturation phase. The term lager is German lagering, which is a maturation phase. So our lagers take much longer. And those windows would be those longer windows would match with wine fermentation as well. Okay, so we have an online question, and I think this one will be for Erin to start with. So the question is, it was mentioned that California is a great place to grow rice, but isn't California in drought every year? And isn't rice a water-intensive crop?
Love that question. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. So first, California, it's a great question about drought. California, throughout its history has fluctuated between very wet years as we had last year and we're shaping up to have this year. So we've always fluctuated between very wet years and very dry years. And that's nothing new, but certainly we do expect that to intensify with climate change. And so a big part of that water management, of course, is water storage, which we have some water storage here in California, but it hasn't really grown with the population. So always advocating for additional water storage, whether that be more groundwater storage or reservoirs like Light Sites Reservoir. Also great question about water intensity for rice growing. As I mentioned at the top, the soil that we use for rice growing is a really heavy clay soil. So while it appears like there's a lot of water on a rice paddy, it's really only about 4 to 5 inches of water. So it's really no more than growing your lawn at home. And so I would say growing rice is much better than growing your lawn at home. You're getting a great healthy food to eat, supporting wildlife. And then of course, much of that water then is recycled. So once the water's drained off that rice paddy, it's going to go downstream and it's going to continue to irrigate other crops as well as bring nutrients like little bugs and things like that, phytoplankton, into the river system. So overall, growing rice in California, we're not only giving super healthy food, sake rice, but supporting all those wildlife programs as well.
Sure. So the next question coming through the online is, please discuss the plus minus FMV scale and why do so few sake show it on their labels?
So first thing, so SMV is called the sake meter value. So it's that's indicate the more or less how dry sake is and how sweet sake is. And higher the number, sake becomes drier. Usually if it's like, for example, negative 20 versus positive 20, positive 20 is much drier than the negative 20. But at the same time, it's more or less, you can just see the dryness, but it's not really completely showing the real dryness because of the aromatic characters, for example, like a fruitiness, that gives you a little bit more sweeter like a feel. And also acidity level, if the sake has a higher acidity, you don't really feel a lot of sweetness, even the same SMV value. So some sake brewers don't really completely, trust this SMV number for the indication of the dryness. But, some brewers do. So probably that's a result of, indicating that on the label or not, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes they don't want the consumer to look at the SMV and make a preconceived judgment as to what is inside. So they want somebody to taste it and not look at the stack as much. Because, like you were saying, there's so many other variables that can affect the taste or the perception of it.
Question?
Hi. I was looking at the pressing technology you're using to make sake, and it seems to be astonishingly primitive. So I'm wondering, are you using that because you can't afford something different, or because it actually produces a product which is unique and different? And then a related question is, do other sake brewers use the same technology, or is there something modern that's widely used?
Yes, other brewers use a lot of modern style, and definitely, the consumption is right. It's a very primitive way of pressing sake. And probably only a few, a handful of sake brewers in Japan use that technique still. And it's more, I have 3 reasons that I decided to use that system. One is, yes, we started as a low budget, so that's, everything was made by our hand or our friend's hand. We bought a used, just stainless steel container, and we modified it with help from our friends. And we sourced wood through our former landlord, and everybody just helped us to just create that. So that just definitely made us, lower budget. So that's one reason. And the second reason, it's interesting to see, for the people as well. And it's a lot of wood, and a lot of sake breweries in Japan still, not a lot, but we know, some sake breweries use that system. They hang piece of wood, the stones, a lot of stones with a rope. Instead, I just use the water barrel. That's more, I feel like it's more American, that's why. And so that's the second reason. And the third reason is it's very, very slow press. It takes 3 days to press 1,000 liter tank worth of mash. So it's slow press, so sake becomes a little bit more rounder. That's what people say. And I feel it too. So that's 3 reasons that and also it's very efficient, that's 4th reason, but very efficiently press sake. And yes, modern days, these days sake breweries in Japan or even United States, they use a lot more modern style pressing method. I wish I could show you a picture of those, but yeah, some brewers use a similar style, but the hydraulic system, not like leverage power. Yeah.
Okay. Time for one more?
We can go through final thoughts.
Okay, so we had hoped to ask the panelists one quick comment from each of them about what would you like people to take home from this conversation we've had?
Oh, yeah. I really love it when I see a sake on a menu that is not at a Japanese restaurant, or in a wine shop. Maybe you might see like 2 or 3 sake bottles. I would urge people to go to their favorite, bottle shop or menu and say, hey, have you ever thought about putting a sake on the menu? Or would you stock, a local sake? Or, I think that just kind of let people know that you're interested. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yoshi.
Yes, it's going to be 2 things, okay?
Oh, okay.
So one thing is just maybe similar to what Yoko said, but I want you to just bring sake to, it doesn't have to be a Japanese restaurant, right? You can just bring it to an Italian restaurant or California cuisine or a French restaurant, whatever you think. And it's amazingly sake pair with a lot of different food. It just, again, like I said in the beginning, it's just a little bit, by understanding sake is an umami-focused beverage. You can just do a lot of satisfied pairing with the non-Japanese or even non-Asian cuisine, is that. So just don't hesitate, just try to bring the, sake to, a lot of different type of restaurant. And also, dinner table, your everyday dinner, you can just maybe think of getting a sake instead of wine sometimes. No offense for wine, because I love wine too, but sometimes. And so second thing I want to say is just American sake, as American sake brewers. I think, of course, we are making sake, and we are still very, very young stage as a craft American sake brewers. But I think it's going to be a more, okay, this is the style of American sake or something like that. Or this is the style of Californian sake. We have only like 30 or less sake brewers in Japan, in United States, so we cannot really categorize, this California sake is like this, or American sake is like this. But I think we all are trying to add our own kind of philosophy into it. So that's a story I should tell to people who buy from us, and some like retail shops or distributors or restaurant people. I want them to just pass on that kind of story to people so that the people can know, okay, this is American sake. We're making, not just good sake from Japan. We're making something different. So, I just want you to know, maybe pay attention to what kind of a story behind.
And Erin, the rice industry gets the final word.
All right. I would just second what Yoko and Yoshi said, drink more sake, try it all, and feel good about it because, it's one of the cleanest drinks around. I mean, it literally has 4 ingredients: fresh, clean water, rice, koji, and yeast. So there's really no other beverage out there that I think you could feel as good about drinking as sake. The rice is coming from growers who are real true stewards of the land. So you truly can feel good about the drink that you're consuming. So, and share your experience. So tell your friends too.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Erin and Yoshi and Yoko. It was really fascinating. I think all of us are going to go home thinking about sake and working sake into more of our meals. It was really cool to learn about the history, the process of making it, and the rice growing itself. So thank you again. Glenn, great job moderating, as always.
Thank you.
We have another great event for everybody coming up on November 30th. It's our Walt Klenz lecture on wine business, and we are going to have Karen McNeil, who wrote the Wine Bible, which is very exciting. So registration is open on our website. I also want to thank all of our supporters, many of whom are here tonight. Really appreciate your support of the Robert Mondavi Institute, although it might be the Robert Mondavi Institute of Wine, Beer, Food Science, and Sake someday. We'll see. Also, just for all the attendees, really appreciate you joining us. As you leave, please consider giving us some feedback on the event. We'd really appreciate that. And we will post a recording of this event that you all will have access to in the future. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your night. We really enjoyed the overall discussion tonight. Thank you.